relationship building, super important. Understated. Everyone talks about networking. This is not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about...
Welcome back to another episode of Careers in Finance. And I am really excited to sit down with Mark Allbee today, talk about all things finance, FP&A, et cetera. Mark and I have been trying to get this on the books for a while, and this is going to be a great conversation. So let's go ahead and kick it off. First of all, Mark, welcome to the podcast.
Oh, thank you so much. Happy to be here.
Let's jump in because, as you know, I always start Careers in Finance with just a little bit about your origin story in terms of, did you always know you wanted to go into finance, and did you study it? What did you get your degree in?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I sort of, yes. Like my father, actually, from as early as I can remember, he was an accounting guy. He was tax, so I was exposed to that at a young age. I helped a bit in his business. He had a small business on the side, and I enjoyed that work, and I found that would be something that might work well for me as I looked at careers. So when I started going to school, accounting was a natural draw, and I felt that it was an obvious place. Understanding a set of financial statements and becoming very analytical with that was going to open a lot of doors in any direction. So that was sort of the way that I went. And I started, early stages, like focusing on some accounting classes, realized that it was something that I also naturally had a knack for. So I started pursuing that. I did go the audit route. I thought that was, again, a great opportunity. Big Four accounting firm. At the end of the day, like, would I tell someone Big Four versus non-Big Four? That's a whole different conversation. But certainly for me, that felt like a right path to actually set myself up. It was a name. It was a training, and then I was going to have that opportunity to really use the skills, and then from there, figure out if I wanted to do something different. So that was a good start.
Yeah. And so a lot of people say going through the Big Four, if that's the path you take, it just gives you optionality because you get exposed to so much. You get time to kind of decide what it's going to be outside of, after the Big Four. But so you got your degree in accounting, is that right?
That's right. Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Got my degree in accounting. Started at KPMG straight away.
Okay. And how long did you stay at KPMG?
It's about 5 years.
Okay.
Just after that. So, it was a good trajectory. Got to see a bunch of different things. Yeah. I think, moving again, I have my tidbits of wisdom, if that's helpful here, is having some, again, rolling with the opportunities that are there, but also having a little bit of an idea of how you want that to go. So, realizing for me, that the individual practice levels were sort of pretty separate. So it was an opportunity to really focus on what area of the business that you wanted to be in. And that may not be the case for every office, but certainly New York was that case because it was a very large office. So there was very well broken down in practice lines, and it kind of came up along that. So finding the practice line that's something that is going to speak to you and something that's going to bring out that work that you want to be in, and then being able to go down that road is my advice. It's like finding the folks that are going to be your champions, people that you'll be able to support. Those are key factors, and something that I think I didn't realize quite so much until later.
Yeah, that's interesting. So the first year or two that you were there, what was that like? Like, how was it different than you thought, or what was just like a day in the life like?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was well prepared. Certainly my father had done the same thing. So he was kind of like, this is going to be hard. You're going to work a lot of hours. Like, it's great. Like, focus on the work. Like, just do what you're supposed to be doing. You have the skills, kind of pep talk. And so I was prepared for that. I think the difference was, like I was saying, is like it became very siloed into the practice area very quickly. So I think going into it, my expectation was, well, I'm going to have a chance. I'm going financial services because I want to do something in financial services. Now, I don't know that everyone breaks it down this way, but KPMG had it financial services and sort of everything else. And within financial services, there was even very well broken out product lines, if you will. And I ended up in insurance, and that was sort of like a good path for me, but I didn't realize it at the time. I don't think I realized it at the time. So that was the thing that was different for me, is that like sticking with a practice area was a great idea. And then really focusing and building those relationships with the partners in that practice area. Like, hey, I want to be here. I want a career in this area. I don't know if I want to stay and be a partner, but I want to work really hard for you for as long as possible and figure it out. that is sort of the advice that I would have, being prepared for that and being focused on like sort of where you want to be. Because you're going to, that subject matter is going to be your experience level.
Yeah, which is so important. It's interesting that you say that, because I was talking to an investment banker based in the Southeast, and he's got a great firm. He's probably like 60 people. So it's on the more boutique side, but certainly a great reputation and track record. And he was saying how important it is to specialize even for investment banking. Like one way to get into investment banking that people don't realize is some kind of specialization. And so it's interesting that you found that even on the sort of big four public accounting side too. So, so you stayed 5 years, which is a good run, really, right?
Good run. Certainly. And again, I think some of that is where I think I kind of hit a wall, and a little bit it was the practice area. So I moved from insurance. I wanted to try to see something different. It became much more difficult to do that, both within the firm, between partners and moving around, and also just finding sort of a foothold. So I did move practice areas from insurance to real estate. And I think maybe when I don't know what it was. I think for me personally, it was like, this was not the kind of jobs that I was looking for. They were like a lot smaller. I was looking for, so maybe there was some sense of like, I came here, but now, I haven't been here. So I'm like, I'm obviously just picking up whatever is available, which is fine. Right. And I think maybe the reality was for me at the time was like, maybe I should have done banking or something else. And maybe now is just a good time to like, let's go get some experience in-house and like go down a little bit, build up that like sort of, I would call it a little more operational capabilities, a little more management. So like that became a much more attractive field for me. So that's why I ultimately decided to leave at that time.
Makes sense. So where did you go? What was your first role after you left KPMG?
So it was a little bit out of the box too. It was a company called In Demand, which was actually in the media and technology space. So the thing that was attractive to me was at a very young age, I was already assuming a fairly decent sized team. So I was going to be able to build my management capabilities right away. It was assistant controller role. It was going to own the budget, which was a big area for me. So that was really the big selling point. My whole existence there was obviously closing the books and doing the normal managing the audit and sort of the operational things around kind of payroll and payments and all of the banking and these areas. But also the key point was like actually owning the budget process from zero, from point one to the end. So actually having those conversations with the leaders, sitting down, understanding the budget, refining it, presenting it. So like that skill, I think, was something that in my mind, I felt like I needed to do. It's not something you do in public accounting. You really don't focus on budgets or forecasting at all.
Yeah. So that's funny you say that too, because one of the things that people say about coming up through a Big Four is just you get exposed to so much that you learn really how to get your feet under you really quickly, no matter the situation, get your arms around the information, and like you just learn and assimilate so quickly, but that you're not used to taking things all the way to the finish line because you don't really own things necessarily, right? So so what were some of the challenges stepping into working inside of an organization and just doing some things that you've never done before?
Management was a new thing. So, I mean, I certainly managed people in the KPMG world, but I realized that is a different, everyone's sort of like, you're coming up the same way. So you've all kind of gone through that same type. Everyone has different backgrounds, but you have a similar experience set. You have like, you're generally like if you're electing to be there, you're working hard and you're someone that's going to be geared toward that. Now I'm moving into a world where people are not necessarily looking for that. They are looking for a bit more of a lifestyle. They want to like work and live. They're not, not necessarily career involvement, people that have been there for 10, 15 years. So here I was 26 or whatever at the time, stepping in and managing people that were like 40 and like, again, no airs about them. And it was fine. But understanding that sensitivity of like how people were going to work, and that you can't just have the same kind of attitude as like, you're a senior, you're a lead senior on the job, and you're just telling your other seniors and the associates what to do, and they're going to do it because they know they need to do it. This is different. So you got to kind of work with people. You're also engagement level is different too, because at a firm you're in for a bit, maybe 3 months, even on the high end, and then you're out, and then you're a new set of team. So, and you learn new people, and you have commonality, but there you have the people that you have, and that's what you've inherited. So unless you have, and from an early on coming into that, one of the challenges that they were telling me was that the team had challenges, and you're going to have to figure that out. And we know going into it that you've never done this before. So like, we're here to help, but this is going to be an experience. So that was something that was interesting. And that was a big challenge for me, having to go through real deep performance evaluations, really getting the experience of like, I need to document poor performance, because not because I want to be a jerk, but because I need to document it so that I can make a decision later. And like understanding that, having those feelings, and having to actually make a couple of difficult decisions and move people around and actually terminate a couple of people, was different. And then I also had the first experience of actually hiring someone from scratch. I had never done that before. Obviously, you just get who you get. Like KPMG has like, obviously world-class recruiting. So you don't, whatever, you're getting people that are top flight coming out of school. Whereas here, you got to find it, and they're going to give you get leads, and there was an HR team and all that, but really meeting people, interviewing, finding the person that you want to work for, and building the right culture was something new to me. And that was such an important thing, understated.
Yeah. Yeah. And nothing really prepares you for that, when you're doing it the first time. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So what do you think, I'm curious, what do you think from your time in public accounting, working at a Big Four, prepared you for the new role? And where do you think the biggest gaps were for you that you maybe like struggled with or just were surprised at, other than, you're inheriting a team with lots of different skills, which is so different. People say that, you don't got to figure out what skills do people even have and what their backgrounds are, right? But where do you think it prepared you the most for that first role inside of an org?
I think, absolutely, you have this analytical capability that you come in with, right? So you've learned that, they've taught you that. Also, skepticism. I know it's like, but the professional skepticism is like 101 of what you learn, like audit day one. So, you just have this, like, you're going to check it, like everything. You have this idea of like, so you're reviewing stuff, like you always like trust but verify kind of attitude. So it kind of ingrains that in you. You're not going to just rubber stamp things. So you are going to go through the efforts to make sure. So you build that in. It's great from management, because you inherently have learned to like really kind of quickly assess when things are a little off. You have the analytical capabilities. You know, sort of the ability to kind of pull things apart and like understand them if it's a confusing or difficult, like whatever it may be. You have those skills, so that you can lean on, and I did, and that helped a lot. That made that part of it very easy. And then I think the challenge a little bit is like having to manage the different modes of working in different sort of type of work. So in accounting, public accounting, it's very focused, and there's different types of what you're doing, but it's all within the same. You're auditing, right? So it's all within the same sort of guise of getting an audit done. Whereas now you're at a company, so you're dealing with a payment problem or a payroll problem, so you have to wear a lot of different hats. You have to be comfortable with that.
So what do you think about your experience at KPMG most prepared you for the role? Like, what skills were you able to say like instantly transferable?
Like it is the analytical capability for sure. It's the sort of skepticism and the ability to kind of look through and quickly assess if something looks off. Just to try to, short circuit, like when someone's sending you something, okay, like quick things like this doesn't tie or that doesn't make sense, or like the numbers don't sound right, like be able to like kind of very quickly make assessments about data without really getting into the weeds, but then also having the skill set to get into the weeds, if you will. So not without, driving into the whole process, but like when you're given a spreadsheet or an analysis, how you unpack that and make sure that everything makes sense, like the way that you go through and make sure that like our numbers linking up, or if there's like different references, or is it the same in every place, so that you're dealing with something that's working in a self-contained way. And then from there, you can kind of like, are the input, then you start driving into what's wrong with the inputs, or is there a problem, or how do you assess whether the data is right? So that capability is strong. Also, really working in a team to get a project done is another thing that you really have well laid out, and at a big accounting firm. So it's an audit, so you're really it's effectively a sprint. I mean, there's always a little bit of a jog, but then there's always ends up being a sprint at the end. So being able to roll your sleeves up, get it done no matter what it is, and sit shoulder to shoulder with people and just figure out like who's got to do what. Let's get it done because here's a deadline. So some of that actually is good and bad because you're hardwired for that. But then when you get into this kind of private world, some of the stuff doesn't operate on, like, you have deadlines, but they don't operate on quite as tight of a timeline always. So you're kind of like a little bit just like not having that deadline actually is hurtful. I think going in, that's sometimes, it sounds silly, but like not having clear deadlines. And so what I had to learn how to do, and this took me some time, is actually create it for myself. Right. Like, so I'm going to build whatever the team is going to do, but I'm going to create that timeline for everybody, and whatever you want to call it, close process, and then budget timelines, like everything kind of lives with a project timeline. And I think that was another thing that's really nice that you learn in a public accounting setting, is like the projects are, you want to maximize the revenue, of course, right? So you want to maximize your time. So you're going to be very efficient about how you do it. So you learn how to be efficient with your time.
Yeah. And working with urgency, it sounds like too, right?
Yes.
That we are running for a finish line, and that makes so much sense. So what did you like the best about that first role, working in private sector, where you've clearly said, this is for me, right? Because we're going to talk more about some of your additional roles, but what did you like about it?
So again, I like the autonomy. I loved, sort of being a trusted leader. And the other thing that I would say the difference between when you leave a public accounting and you go to private is you're now in this org, and it was purposely done. Like, I focused on a smaller org. So it was like maybe 150 people company. So you get to actually really know all the people. You get to know the departments. You get to know particularly the other leaders. I was being seen at again, at a young age as like a key leader within the organization. So having the opportunity to see other people and learn from their experience, like there were people that were creative, there were marketing, there were like HR. It wasn't just finance and accounting folks that I was liaising with. So I was getting this other side of the world, and those people were learning from me because they didn't know. So when we were doing budget, I was the one that was explaining, well, no, you don't look at it like this, or you look at it like that, or like, this is how we should budget it, because like, you don't just put everything in, and if you put everything in and get it and you don't spend it, like people, the same type of things that people were learning, you're able to dictate and teach people. But then it's really being that like a trusted voice and sort of, I guess, building on your voice, right? So like I have an analysis, and that was a little bit of a learning curve at that age. Again, having the confidence to come in with people and say, no, you're wrong, and this is what, like, I think this, not like that, but like, you are like, I think you're wrong because of this reason, and like, this is why. And being able to be respectful, but also like be forceful about what your point of view is, and like learning from others as well. And like, maybe not everything's black and white. So those were great things about the role, for sure.
Yeah. Nice. So how long were you there? And then what did you do next?
I was there for 3 years, actually. So we, and honestly, it kind of ran its course. Like the business was not a very, it wasn't a growth business. It was a sort of a flat line. It existed as a joint venture between some major media conglomerates to provide a service. So it really existed to kind of break even. So as a result, the culture was a little more of a lifestyle company, and that was not exactly what I was looking for. I got what I needed after a few years, like the experience, the management, the budget experience. So what in that time, I had some flexibility. I thought that what I decided I wanted to do was go back for my MBA, because I felt like it was something where I really wanted to slate my experience, like hone in more on the finance capabilities, like the core finance capabilities, more FP&A. I wasn't going to get that from that angle. I was very well suited for the controllership, assistant controller roles, but I wanted something that was much more hybrid, where I had a broader view of finance. Small was good. Very attractive to me was the startup role. So that's where I went. I kind of went to a startup pre-seed stage. It was a couple young guys that were at the time buying a restaurant business and looking to, with private equity money, make a little bit of investment, rebrand the business, and kind of reshape what they were looking to put out there, and be a little more efficient, kind of go with, cool stuff like commissary model, like a lot of different things that kind of grew up over time, but like then was like innovative and new and fresh. So that was interesting to me. And, honestly, like it didn't go great. Like for me, like I think I did fine, there. It was a very fast paced culture. It was like 3 or 4 of us working. Like it was a lot of, like it was a little all over the place. And, frankly, what ended up happening was a big reason I was there was I was going to learn this other side of the business, but I was also bringing forth private equity firm wanted to be able to get audited. They wanted a lot of these things done. So they were like, this guy is perfect because he's going to get something out of it, but also be able to provide a very stable sort of reporting structure. Business just didn't perform super well initially. Eventually did, but didn't perform super well initially. A CFO left, so I was there not that long, like a little over a year, and then I ended up leaving. So I had a couple of those, which again, I would reflect on some of those shifts as learning in my experience, but something that I think could be avoided for others that may be watching this, in a way of like just being a little more thoughtful about the moves that you're making, like, at the time, and the thesis, because the thesis sounded right, but I think at the time I didn't know enough to like really understand the risks, the downside risks. I was still pretty young, and then realizing that it kind of sets you back, and you kind of like have to go back forward a little bit and work harder effectively to get to where you want to go, because it's not all moving. It's not linear. You kind of like maybe taking a step to the side or to the back, but that's what happened. But I still learned a lot from everything that I've gone through at those spots.
Yeah. And going to a seed stage startup is so different than everything else you had done before then. And, you clearly lived through the startup chaos and all of that. But I'm glad you touched on, going to get your MBA and wanting to, touch on more FP&A and everything, because that's one of the questions I wanted to ask you is just like, you're so, deep right now in FP&A and, that mindset and just so much experience. Like, how did you, it sounds like a lot of that transition was going to get your MBA and then just seeking other roles that would push you there. I know that this is, I'm curious. I always like to ask people how they would describe the difference between, accounting and FP&A, because I just love to hear it in people's own words. Like, how would you describe the two?
Yeah, I mean, I would say the accounting, I mean, again, very simply, accounting like is sort of reporting the news, and like FP&A is kind of like projecting the future in a way. But also I would call it as strategic, a little more strategic, whereas the accounting side is much more operational, much more like I said, just reporting, which is a critical thing to do. But it's sort of it's a little bit slower pace because you have not always, but sometimes you have the time to actually review the numbers and spend time with it. So versus an FP&A where things are changing and you have to make assumptions that are not necessarily the kind of assumptions that you're going to make from an accounting, on the accounting side. So you kind of go through and you have to really tell a story. And a lot of that FP&A side becomes telling a story and projecting that of what the strategy and the go forward plan, maybe something that doesn't exist today. Whereas accounting, like I said, is more of a historical review, if you will. Like you are telling a story, but you're telling a story of what happened versus what's going to happen. Or like there's a bit of marketing associated with FP&A sometimes, right? There's like a bit of here's the data, but I'm gonna give you an analysis or a cut on the data, or I'm gonna cut it a different way that you would never do in accounting, because accounting is what it is. Here are the rules, and it operates this way. Whereas you may say, well, this is what happened, but there's these reasons, so I'm going to throw this out. And if you normalize it, it looks like this. And then if you on a normalized basis going forward, you can look at it a different way. So you have the opportunity to reframe the reader's perspective on the data really in the right way. And you need to do it you need to present that with honesty and data, but you don't necessarily have the same rules that you do on the accounting side.
Yeah. Really well said. I think that's right. And you've got to, sometimes there's nuance or inference or, like, as you said, assumptions and things like that don't come into play in accounting. So let's skip ahead a little bit because today you're the VP of Finance and Operations at Roku Labs. Did I say it right?
Yeah,
Roku?
Roko, yeah.
Yes. Good,
Yeah.
Roku. Okay. Yeah. Tell us a little bit about that role and what you're doing in that role.
Yeah, I mean, I could not be happier here. Like, honestly, we had such a great, I mean, I've been here for a little over a year now. So I started in July of last year. And I came in actually through referral. So I worked in one of my previous roles. I had spent meaningful amount of time with one of the executives. We worked together. I was really his FP&A partner. We maintained a relationship for many years. He and the CEO and founder of Roko were also good friends. And he was aware that Dima, who is my current CEO, and I just have nothing but respect for Dima, but Dima was looking to take on private equity investment to to really look at being a platform and growing the business in a meaningful way. Either way, they needed finance, so it was kind of a win-win no matter what's going to happen. We hit it off. I think we have a very similar mindset in a lot of things. And basically, I came in right before we were interviewing and looking at private equity firms. So I had the opportunity to kind of really see it from the ground up, like pre-LOI point of view. So understanding sort of like the beginning phases of meeting the private equity firms and kind of talking about the business and hearing how he would talk about the business and the way that we would kind of present things and just be very open about what we were doing and what we were looking to do and transparent. And then finding the right partner, like understanding his process on how he assessed who the right partner was for us versus like someone that wanted to maybe scoop up the company and kind of have everyone be like really just kind of folded into a different platform. So really the focus was building a platform with a new party. We found the right partner in Westview Capital Partners. Could not be happier. They're like over the moon, like great relationship with those guys. Like, and they said it from the beginning, like this is what they were. And like a year later could not be more true. So, but I'm fast forwarding a bunch of stuff. Like really when I came in, it was help close the transaction, work through all the diligence, which we did right off the bat. So it was a rapid fire of work and really understanding the business. Great. Couldn't be a better way to learn a business in the diligence cycle. And then actually transform the business from, in accounting, we were operating cash-based books with like an accrual-based model. So actually be able to get accrual-based books into the system and build recurring processes for payments and invoices and things like this it was unique. So in a lot of ways for me, I had been with teams where maybe I would have, a guy or a gal reporting to me or another guy or gal who were reporting to, so there was layers there. So I didn't touch a lot of the areas that I was having to touch, but in a lot of ways it was wonderful because it brought me back to the basics and it gave me the opportunity to like think of things on its head. How do I think of growing certain processes, whether it be my budget cycle or invoicing or accounting and reporting, starting with something that's simple. Like you don't always have to start with, now we need a new accounting system and this is a huge implementation and a huge cost. This is the thing that I came from. I was working at a few startups and that was the thing that like I was told, like, you're going to implement NetSuite. We never implemented NetSuite, by the way. It was always, the update was, it was sort of always like, I heard the name. We think that that's going to be the way that you need to do it. So you should evaluate it, but we think that's what you'll do. Then you get into it and you're like, yeah, it's going to cost like $200,000. And they're like, no. So
and take a year or two.
And you need consultants and I'm going to need to hire people and blah, 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 and all this other stuff. So then reality kicks in. And I knew that from the very beginning. So I just went in and said, how am I going to do this in the most simple way now? And then kick that can down the road a year or two or whatever, maybe forever. I don't know. But like my idea was like, use with what I have and build on. So that's what I've done. And, it's been a great experience. And now we're, sort of like humming along going into the next year. So we're now thinking about planning for the new year and what where are we going to invest in the business? And that's been the big conversation, is what the next strategy is, how we're going to invest. And, being part of that discussion is meaningful for me. And it's a small, tight knit group of folks that are working on it. But, very soon we're going to look to grow this business substantially. So we're real excited.
So fun to be working on something at growth stage like that and build in many ways, coming in and being able to build things from scratch too. What's the day in the life like for you right now? And I know you're in a startup, so it changes all the time. But what's the current kind of day in the life like?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of all over. Like, I am a one-person finance team right now. So, I
Yeah.
mean, a lot of it's sometimes operational, and we're focusing on really key analyses or budget focused or like closing reporting, or as I want to say mundane, or as like basic as making payments and actually processing invoices for clients. So it ends up being sort of a little bit all over. But the main focus has been trying to be more efficient with my time and be, in a way so I can automate more and give myself a little more flexibility and time um, to work on some more strategic areas. I mean, the business, and I've even had some opportunity to work on some business development areas. So it's been an exciting area for me. Just a bit about the business. We're a software consultancy, so we do software development consulting. So it adds having a background like mine, where I worked in a lot of software startups. It's aligned. So I've been kind of mining those contacts to build some relationships, and some are interesting and some are not. But, I'm trying to spread the word a little bit about what we're doing. And we really have a very like great offering of development for folks. And I've even brought in a couple folks interested in projects. So, that's it's not even about like achieving that as much as like having the opportunity to like talk about the business and really feel like I'm trying to help grow the business in every which way that I can. So I like sometimes it's really exciting. And some days are like I said, you just kind of blocking and tackling, but then there's days that are just super strategic and very like high deep analyses. So it changes a lot. And
you have such a unique path, coming into KPMG, cutting your teeth on public accounting, getting your MBA, working in startups, and having all of that full startup experience. What advice would you give to somebody that's going to come in a background similar to yours, coming out of a big four, jumping into the startup world? How do they thrive? Like, what do they need to thrive? What skills are important? What, characteristics about them or character traits are important? And just like, what advice would you give somebody to say, here's how you thrive in a startup world?
Absolutely. That's a great question. I think, starting the basics is obviously important, but relationship building, super important. Understated. Everyone talks about networking. This is not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about actually building relationships with people that you work with, and not being afraid to ask for help or ask them for advice. I think people have given that to me over the years. Again, I'm here for that reason, right? Like, I'm here because of that experience, because I had a good experience with someone and we liked working with each other, and I maintained that relationship for years. So that is how, and again, I see that in our business today. Like, that's how we get a lot of business. So like building those relationships is critical, but then also being a little thoughtful about what you want, I think is the other area. So like, if it is that core FP&A role, or being thoughtful about like, I need to get this level of experience, because then if I have that, then someone would that's looking for me as like a CFO later, they're like, yes, you checked the box on that, maybe, or you did it enough. Like, you'll be able to demonstrate your skill, or you'll learn from someone. So finding someone that can mentor you in different capacities, or finding someone that could, or finding the right role that you can get those skill sets is like, could not be more important. In some ways, as you get much later in your career, those opportunities, I feel, are much harder, because everyone is expecting you to come in with a certain level of skill set. And like, a lot of times, particularly in my role, like, I am the subject matter expert. There is no other finance person. So there is no other person for me to talk to. I'd have to find that person outside of the firm. And I have mentors and folks that I actually do look at. So building and maintaining those relationships are critical for later. And I think that it's not just from business or getting a job, but it's also advice and sort of like direction. I think it's not all relationships, but a lot of it's that's gonna open a lot of doors, I think.
Yeah, that's great advice. I think people, you carry the people with you that you meet through your career, and often they become friends, right? So
and you do the right thing by them. I think that's the other side is you show your willingness. And again, I can go into a litany of examples of why I think that I ended up having this relationship, but it's because I pushed and I showed that I was going to do what it took, and like that, and I was there for him when I needed it. Right. So like, and there was really no boundary. I'm not saying you have to be like that. But showing someone that you're going to extend for them, they're going to end up extending for you, and for the most part, and that's happened to me. So there's that. But then again, like focusing on the right experience and being able to like, okay, if I want to go into this role, these are the skills. The last thing, if I may, this was actually really good advice. I had a CFO, one of the best people I ever worked for. And when we were talking about this, about growing my career, getting more of this FP&A experience and being able to, like, he was a big champion for me in this regard. One of the things that we did is we did a couple sessions where he was like, okay, what's your goal? And it's like, and it was very thoughtful. And I've done this with other people that have been on my teams and they've loved it. So I started with, what do you want? Like in words, like, and for me, it was like, I want to be a CFO someday at X, right? Just like, let's say that's what I was saying. And he's like, okay, what are the skills that you need? Okay, here are the skills. Let's write them down. And then in those skills, let's assess you on those skills. Like here, you're so strong in this one. Maybe you need more experience here. You have good talent and you have good skills, but you haven't had the opportunity. So how do we get you these opportunities? And then like, we basically were like, okay, and like really like it was like, let's look at McKinsey and like, what does a CFO need to do? Okay, here's these 5 things. And then now we put these on a board, and each 5 is like, here are the things that you do really well. And here are the things that you need more experience in. And then how do we get those? And it's so super intuitive, but no one really does that. And, again, I love that. So I started doing it with my team and they just were over the moon. Like, what do you want? Okay, how do I get? And then maybe there's things that I can give you, maybe there's not, but maybe there's a way that I can advise you to go, that you can get these other things.
Yeah. Yeah. Great advice. What a good mentor that person is that did that with you. And then it's a gift you keep repaying to others. I love it. Mark, thank you so much. This was a fantastic conversation. I really enjoyed it. And thanks for sharing about your experience, your career journey so far, and your lessons learned. We appreciate you so much. Yeah.
Thank you, Anna.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us today. We hope you enjoyed the conversation. FinPod is brought to you by Corporate Finance Institute, the #1 rated online provider of finance and banking training, certifications, and productivity tools.